There was a time in human history when a small handful of salt could be worth more than many precious possessions, not because people were foolish, not because resources were scarce alone, but because ancient civilizations believed salt represented something far greater than seasoning, something deeper, something symbolic, something powerful. And according to ancient traditions across multiple cultures, salt carried meanings that extended far beyond food. Now think carefully. Why would wise men, kings, merchants, travelers, priests, and teachers all pay special attention to something as ordinary as salt? Because to them, salt represented preservation, purity, value, loyalty, and survival. An old teacher once held a grain of salt in his hand and told his students, "The smallest things often reveal the greatest truths." At first, the students laughed. How could something so common carry profound meaning? But the teacher continued. Without salt, food spoiled quickly. Without preservation, communities struggled. Without protection, abundance disappeared. And slowly the students began understanding. Salt wasn't admired because of its appearance. It was admired because of what it prevented: decay, loss, corruption. And ancient wisdom often focused more on preservation than acquisition. Now listen carefully. Modern people are obsessed with gaining things. More money, more success, more possessions, more attention. But ancient teachers frequently asked a different question. What are you preserving? Because acquiring something is one skill. Protecting it is another. That is why salt became a symbol of stewardship, the ability to protect what matters. Now imagine two families. One family constantly gains resources but wastes them carelessly. The other protects resources wisely. Years later, which family remained strong? That was the ancient lesson hidden inside salt. Protection creates longevity. Now here comes one of the deepest truths ancient traditions attach to salt. Salt changes everything it touches. Quietly, without announcing itself, without demanding attention. And wise men admired this characteristic, because they believed true wisdom operates the same way. Quiet influence, lasting impact, invisible transformation, not loud displays. Now think carefully. How many of life's most important forces are invisible? Trust, character, discipline, integrity, respect. You cannot always see them immediately, but they shape outcomes powerfully. And ancient teachers believed salt symbolized these hidden forces. Now listen carefully to this next truth. Salt also reminded people that value is not always obvious. Some of the most important things in life rarely attract attention. Peace, patience, discipline, health, wisdom. People often ignore them until they are gone. And that was exactly how ancient societies viewed salt. Ordinary until absent, then suddenly priceless. Now imagine building a great house. Most people admire the visible structure, but wise builders respect the foundation. Salt became a symbol for foundations, the invisible elements supporting visible success. And in the next part, you're going to discover why ancient traditions connected salt to loyalty, promises, and human character itself. Ancient traditions often contained a strange practice. When two people formed an important agreement, salt was sometimes present, not because salt had magical powers, but because it represented something every lasting relationship required: trust. Now think carefully. Why would ancient teachers use salt to symbolize loyalty? Because salt preserved things, and loyalty preserves relationships, promises, communities, families. Without loyalty, everything eventually weakens. An old merchant once explained this to his son. He said, "Gold may buy cooperation temporarily, but trust creates cooperation that lasts." That lesson stayed with the boy for life, because ancient wisdom believed trust was more valuable than wealth itself. And salt became a reminder of that principle. Now listen carefully. Ancient teachers understood something many people still struggle to understand today. Character determines sustainability. A talented person without character often creates instability. A wealthy person without character often creates chaos. A powerful person without character often creates destruction. That is why loyalty became such an important virtue, because loyalty reflected consistency, and consistency creates trust. Now imagine a bridge. People cross it confidently only when they trust its strength. Relationships work the same way. Families work the same way. Businesses work the same way. And ancient traditions believe loyalty formed the bridge supporting human cooperation. Now here comes one of the most powerful lessons hidden inside the symbolism of salt. Salt remains itself regardless of circumstances. It does not become sugar because pressure appears. It does not change identity to gain approval. And ancient teachers admired this deeply because they believed integrity meant remaining faithful to principles even when conditions changed. Now think carefully. How many people remain honest only when honesty is convenient? Loyal only when loyalty benefits them? Disciplined only when motivation is high? Ancient wisdom challenged this behavior constantly because true character appears during difficulty, not comfort. And salt became a symbol of reliability. Now listen carefully to this next truth. Many people chase influence, but ancient teachers focus first on trustworthiness. Why? Because influence without trust eventually collapses, and trust requires consistency over time. Just like preservation requires salt over time. Nothing valuable remains strong through neglect. Now imagine planting a tree. The growth is slow. The roots form gradually. But eventually the tree becomes strong enough to survive storms. That was the ancient philosophy behind trust. Built slowly, protected carefully, maintained intentionally. Now here comes another hidden meaning of salt. Ancient traditions viewed it as a reminder that small things often create the biggest outcomes. Tiny acts of honesty, tiny acts of discipline, tiny acts of integrity, repeated consistently. These behaviors shape entire lives. Just as tiny grains of salt preserve large amounts of food. Now listen carefully. The hidden lesson was never really about salt alone. It was about becoming the kind of person others can trust. Reliable, consistent, dependable. Because according to ancient wisdom, character preserves opportunities the same way salt preserves food. But there's another layer to this ancient symbol. A layer connected to wisdom, influence, and personal responsibility. And once you understand this next lesson, you'll see why ancient teachers respected simplicity so deeply. There's an old teaching found in many traditions that compares valuable people to salt. At first, this comparison seems strange. After all, salt is small, ordinary, almost invisible. But that was precisely the point. Ancient teachers believed the most powerful influences in life are often quiet. Now think carefully. A single grain of salt rarely attracts attention. Yet without it, entire meals lose balance. And ancient wisdom believed some people serve a similar role in society. Not always famous, not always wealthy, not always recognized, but deeply valuable because their presence improves everything around them. Now listen carefully. Modern culture often measures value through visibility, followers, status, popularity, attention. But ancient teachers used different measurements: integrity, wisdom, reliability, service, character. And these qualities often operate quietly, just like salt. Now imagine a lantern inside a dark room. The lantern does not demand applause. It simply provides light. That was the ancient model of influence. Impact without obsession over recognition. Now here comes one of the deepest truths hidden in this symbolism. Wise men believe people should add value wherever they go. Not noise, not drama, not confusion. Value. Because value creates lasting influence. And lasting influence creates legacy. Now think carefully. Why are certain people remembered long after they are gone? Not because they accumulated the most, but because they contributed the most. Ancient wisdom admired contribution over consumption. And salt became a reminder of that principle. Now listen carefully to this next truth. Salt works through contact. It affects what it touches. And ancient teachers believe human beings operate similarly. Your habits affect others. Your words affect others. Your energy affects others. Your character affects others, whether you realize it or not. That is why wise men encourage people to examine what they were bringing into every room. Peace or conflict. Wisdom or confusion, discipline or chaos, because influence spreads. Now imagine dropping a small stone into a still pond. The ripples move outward far beyond the original impact. Ancient teachers believed human behavior works the same way. Small actions create consequences larger than expected. And this is why personal responsibility mattered so much. Now here comes another hidden lesson. Salt enhances rather than dominates. It improves food without becoming an entire meal. And wise men saw a profound principle here. The strongest leaders often elevate others rather than constantly seeking attention for themselves. The strongest teachers create growth in others. The strongest mentors create confidence in others. And true influence multiplies value instead of demanding worship. Now listen carefully. Ancient traditions respected people who strengthened communities quietly, people who preserved values, protected wisdom, maintained integrity, because these individuals acted like salt, stabilizing forces during unstable times. But there is still one final hidden meaning behind this ancient symbol, a meaning connected directly to purpose, legacy, and the impact of a human life. An old teacher once asked the students a question: what remains after a person is gone? The students gave many answers: possessions, achievements, buildings, money. But the teacher shook his head. Then he held up a small handful of salt and said, "What truly remains is what you preserved." That statement confused them initially, but over time, its meaning became clear, because ancient wisdom focused heavily on preservation, not merely accumulation. Now think carefully. Many people spend their lives acquiring things, yet few spend time protecting what truly matters: character, wisdom, relationships, values, peace, integrity. And according to ancient traditions, these are the treasures that survive beyond temporary success. Now listen carefully. Salt became a symbol of legacy because it protected things from decay, and wise men believe meaningful lives do the same. They preserve truth, preserve wisdom, preserve culture, preserve goodness, preserve trust. Now imagine a gardener planting trees whose shade he may never personally enjoy. Why would he do that? Because he understands legacy, because he understands preservation, because he understands responsibility beyond himself. That was the ancient mindset behind salt, thinking beyond immediate gratification. Now here comes one of the deepest truths in this entire discussion. Modern society often celebrates accumulation: more followers, more money, more possessions, more attention. But ancient wisdom frequently celebrated stewardship instead, the ability to protect valuable things over time, because what is gained quickly can disappear quickly, but what is preserved carefully can last generations. Now, listen carefully to this next principle. The hidden meaning of salt was never about superstition. It was about responsibility. Ancient teachers used everyday objects to teach timeless truths, and salt reminded people that small actions matter. Consistency matters. Integrity matters. Preservation matters. Now think carefully about your own life. What are you preserving? Your values? Your peace? Your discipline? Your relationships? Because whatever you protect intentionally tends to survive, and whatever you neglect eventually weakens. Ancient wisdom understood this law deeply. Now here comes the final lesson. The most valuable people are not always the loudest people. The most influential people are not always the most visible people. Often, the greatest impact comes from individuals who quietly preserve goodness wherever they go, just like salt, silent, simple, powerful. Now remember this ancient truth. Salt was never respected because of how it looked. It was respected because of what it protected. And perhaps the same question applies to every human life. Not merely what you gained, but what you preserved. If this message opened your eyes, subscribe to the channel and share this video with someone who appreciates deep wisdom, hidden meanings, and timeless life lessons. Because sometimes the smallest symbols carry the greatest truths.